We have now configured switch 1 in G15 to be able to talk to G16, and we've also configured G16 switch 1 to be able to talk to G15. And we can see that if I toggle G15 switch 1 to true, we will now see that G16 light 1 goes true because it has seen G15 switch 1 go true. So the controllers are communicating to each other through the EGD. Switch 1 in G15 is talking to G16 and vice versa. Now what we need to do is we need to get the controllers switch 1 and light 1 to communicate to simplicity. To do that, we need to use the HMI server for the simplicity project. So in this case, my HMI server is EWS SVR, so I'm going to use EWS SVR HMI to configure my simplicity project to receive data from G15 and from G16. Now, it just so happens that in this case, EWS SVR is also my EGD configuration server. We can see that the EGD configuration server is configured from the system file, and in our case now, it is EWS SVR. But we're going to have to configure my HMI server, EWS SVR, to display points from G15 and G16 in simplicity. In order to do that, we once again have to reference both G15 and G16. We can see that G16 is already referenced, so all we need to do is add G15. Now that we've added G15 and G16 as reference devices, we will go ahead and do an HMI build and download. We've got two warnings. We'll take a look at those. And both of these are acceptable for our purposes. And then we'll go ahead and do a download. We'll get a message that tells us that alarms are not supported for Simplicity version 8.2. That's okay. We're using a project. We will not get alarm data to come into Simplicity. We'll be using Workstation Alarm Viewer in our case. So we go ahead and do the build and download for my HMI. And we're going to come over to the status window. And what we want to see especially is we want to come over to this HMI feature and note that the HMI importer is running. Now while it's running, you don't want to do anything to Simplicity. Just let it run. And what we're hoping for is all green, no errors or warnings associated with any of our HMI features. And we have that. The importer is still running. We need to wait for it to finish. And what this is doing, it's taking our EGD configuration and putting it into the Simplicity master database. Now with the HMI, if for some reason the importer does not run, you can right-click on the HMI feature and select Start Subfeature. You could also stop the selected feature and then start it again. Another thing you can do to troubleshoot your Simplicity project and your EGD is you can come over to the reference devices and see if you are receiving data from the applicable variables. In our case, we're looking for light 1 and switch 1 from G16 as well as G15. And we can see that we're getting good data from G16 light 1, as well as we should be getting similar data from switch 1. and it looks like we're good. And we could do the same thing for G15. We should see green, good data for both variables. Now, once that has been completed and my importer has run, then what I need to do is I need to come over to my Simplicity project and open that up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the project. And one of my screens closed out, that's fine. And then I'm going to start it back up again. And we should get this message. The master and runtime project configuration are out of date. Would you like to perform a configuration update prior to starting the project? This is a good message to get, as it tells you that the master database has been updated by the EGD configuration server and the HMI import. So we will go ahead and update our Simplicity project by starting it. And we can come over to our points and actually check to see if our data has come in. So you can see there's G16. So if we come down to G16 light 1, we hopefully will see that the variable has been added to our Simplicity project. Now we see, let's see if it's in here. There's G16 light 1. And to see if you're actually getting live data, you can right click and come down to Point Control Panel, and we see that we have live data. If we weren't getting live data, there would be asterisks here in place of the 1. So this is a good sign. This is telling us that Simplicity is getting data through the EGD. So now all we need to do is configure our screen, provided switch 1 and light 1 for G15 are also coming in. So if we come over to our Simplicity screen, now I've created a screen that should display switch 1 and light 1. Now I haven't added them to my project yet, but we can see here that we are getting some data. But in this case, we are missing something. So we're going to have to troubleshoot this, and this might be a good exercise to figure out why I'm not getting data for G15. I am getting it for G16, but I'm not getting it for G15. So we'll take a look at that. Now, as another troubleshooting tool, we can see the point, or we can view the point control panel from the Simplicity screen as well. If we right-click on the Simplicity screen and go to point control panel, we should see all the variables that are associated with the screen. And sure enough, we can see that we are not receiving any G15 data, but we are receiving G16 data. G22 we haven't configured, so don't worry about that. So that's telling us that we've got some issue with the import of G15 data into the Simplicity project. Now, I was able to troubleshoot and fix my issue with Simplicity. Some of the things that I did to try to fix it, especially when you're processing a large amount of data through the HMI, you may need to do several builds and downloads. You can force a download to the HMI just by selecting the checkbox and doing a download. No issues with that. So you may need to do several of those until you get all green and you get your importer to import correctly. Another thing you can do is you can unselect your reference devices and then reselect them and do another build and download. And that'll kind of force the HMI to reconfigure everything and provide new data to the EGD, or get new data from the EGD configuration server and put new data into the Simplicity master database. So it will overwrite the old data, which may have an error. And then what I did was stop and start my simplicity project. So what we need to do now is we need to test to see that this works, that simplicity is able to send a command through light or through switch 1 and receive data from light 1. Now before we do that, we do have a forced variable over in one of our components. So I'm going to go to my view forced variables, and we can see that switch 1 is forced here, so I'll remove that. And now I should see or be able to manipulate light 1 and switch 1. So let's see what happens. While we do this, let's come over here to our view menu, and we're going to take a look at our status bar so we can actually see what is being sent to the HMI or to the controller when we select these buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and select light 1 or switch 1, and you can see that switch 1 has been set to a 1. And then I'll toggle that and have it set to a 0. Now we're seeing no change in my light status, so let's see what happens. Now we can see that switch 1 for G15 is what was keeping light 1 for both G15 and G16 on. So now we can see that when I toggle on switch 1, not only does it go to its controller and turn on its light 1, but it also turns on G16's light 1 through the EGD. So I can do the same thing with switch 1 in G16, and I should get similar results.